Hello and welcome back to my channel. I hope you're all very well. As you can hear, my voice still isn't better. It's not great, but I can now do things like inflect and add tone, so that's an improvement. Today we're going to be doing my September wrap up. It's a little bit late, thanks to La Voce, but we're going to go for it. I read quite a few books in September. I think I read about 12, would be my guess. So fewer than August, which makes sense because it wasn't the summer holidays. And I read a bit of a mix, mostly ebooks, a few physical books as well. And I did 2 readathons, so the Magical Readathon and the full into Reading Seasonathon. And I did vlog both of those. So we're going to whiz through most of the books today. We'll make it a speedy one. Definitely shorter than my August wrap up. You can hold me to that. It'll be shorter than that one because there's fewer books and I talked about lots of these in vlogs. So without any further ado, let's get to the books. The first book I read was an ARC, and that was The Transgender Issue by Sean Fay. What a book. What a book. This was it just blew my mind. Absolutely amazing. Every single person should read this book. It was fantastic. So this is a non-fiction book about transgender rights in the UK. As you may know, then feminism in the UK often is of the turf variety, unfortunately. There's a lot of transphobia in the UK and very little understanding of what trans people need in order to just go about their daily lives. So in this book, then, Sean Fay makes an argument for the exact changes that need to be made for trans people, and also showing how that benefits all of us if those changes are made. And it was fantastic. I saw one review that described it as every single sentence was a mic drop moment, and that's such a good way of describing it. You could pick any paragraph in that book, read it, and just be like, wow, that was so well put and so informative but accessible and important and needs to be shouted from the rooftops. My Kindle copy was basically one big highlight by the end. So go and read it. Just go and read it. It's fantastic. It's not too long. It's very readable and so important. Next up, we got to the Magical Readathon, and the first book I read for that was Innocent Traitor by Alison Weir. This is a historical fiction about Lady Jane Grey, who was queen for 9 days in the Tudor period before she was very much deposed and decapitated by Mary I. I really enjoyed this. It was a really good historical fiction. There were a couple of things that let it down, I thought. There were too many perspectives. It was a bit jumbled and sort of all over the place in that regard. But apart from that, it was a really well-rooted historical fiction. Alison Weir is a historian. She writes a lot of non-fiction. Basically, this entire shelf, I mean, it's not all Alison Weir, but a lot of it is Alison Weir. So she is a historian who also writes historical fiction. So it's very rooted in truth. And I thought it gave a really good sort of comprehensive view of the Tudor court at that time and all of the things going on, because there was a lot going on. So I gave this one 4 stars. After I finished Innocent Traitor, I started another arc which I just wasn't vibing with. And it was just bad. It was bad, so I DNF'd it. I could feel a reading slump coming on, so I read a book that I knew would drag me out of that reading slump before it even started, and that was the next Bridgerton book, Romancing Mr. Bridgerton by Julia Quinn. This was so much fun. I loved it so much. It's my favourite Bridgerton book so far, absolutely, hands down. This one is the story of Colin and Penelope Featherington, and they had such a fantastic romance. They're a little bit older than the previous books, and the heroines have been sort of late teens, early 20s, so it was nice to have a heroine in her late 20s who was a bit more sure of the world. All of the previous Bridgerton books had either something that let them down for me or just didn't blow me away. I had a great time, but they didn't blow me away. This one, could not fault it. Absolutely flawless. 5 stars. Fantastic. The next book I also read for the Book Voyage Challenge, and that is The Girl with a Louding Voice by Abi Dare. This is a young adult book about a teenage girl who lives in Nigeria, and she is essentially sold to an older man to be his third wife. And so she escapes that sort of terrible situation and finds herself in an even worse situation as she is sort of caught up in human trafficking, essentially. And the story follows her as she finds a way to not just escape her circumstances, but to better them and get an education and fulfill the potential that she knows she had. I really, really enjoyed this one. I thought it was a really good way of approaching intersectional feminism through fiction, as it not just was about a girl finding power in her own voice, but was about her finding the resources, the financial resources, the emotional support, the people that you need in order to help you actually make a difference in your life and get yourself out of poverty for yourself and for future generations. So I thought that was a really good insight, and I really enjoyed this one. There were a couple of moments that again were a little bit sort of let it down for me, a little bit cringy isn't quite the right word, but if I see her story written without a trace of irony ever, then something in me just goes, no. So things like that were just occasionally a little bit on the nose, but I did really enjoy it, and I gave this one 4 stars. Next up was another arc, and that is Harrington House by J.P. Nother. This is a haunted house novella, and our main character, she's just had a terrible breakup. She moves into what is clearly a haunted house, and not only does she have to deal with ghosts, she also has to deal with falling for her super hot landlord. It was great. It was really fun. Just the right balance of kind of spooky atmosphere and fun slow burn romance, which I think we're going to get over a series of books. I really, really enjoyed it. Also, it was a really good sort of queer romance at the centre of it. So I gave this one 4 stars, and I also recommended this one to my housemate, who read it in one sitting and loved it. So definitely go and check that one out. If you like haunted houses, if you want something very quick that you can whiz through in October, definitely have a look at that one. The next book that I listened to, the audiobook for, is A Study in Scarlet by Arthur Conan Doyle. This is the first Sherlock Holmes book, and I also read this one for the Back to the Classics challenge for the prompt of an author that you've never read before, because despite my username, I have never read Sherlock Holmes. There is a good reason for my username, even though I haven't read Sherlock Holmes. But I'm now reading Sherlock Holmes and enjoying it. So I really enjoyed A Study in Scarlet. It was a really good introduction to the world of Sherlock Holmes. I am currently listening to the audiobook of The Sign of 4 and enjoying it even more. You can definitely tell by the time you get to the second book that we sort of found our footing, and Holmes and Watson are just such well-established characters, and I'm having such a great time listening to that one. So yes, really enjoyed this one. I haven't given it a star rating yet because the first 2 books are in 1 volume for me, so I'm going to wait until I've finished The Sign of 4, but very much enjoying this, and I do have the whole set and I can't wait to read/listen to them all. Then we have another arc, and that is The Goddess of Nothing at All by Kat Rector, and this is a fantasy set in Norse mythology, and it's about Sigyn, who is the wife of Loki in Norse mythology. I thought it was, first of all, really interesting to read a mythological retelling that isn't a Greek retelling. Yay! There are other mythologies out there. So that was really, really great. And it explored lots of different aspects of Norse mythology. And one of the things I really, really enjoyed about this is the way that it framed Loki and Sigyn, both of them, their queerness in the sort of context of all of Asgard, and how in Kat Rector's interpretation their queerness is part of the reason the other gods mock them and exclude them, and they live on the outskirts and the fringes of Asgardian society. That being said, there were some things that just didn't quite do it for me in this book. Mostly it was just a bit slow for me. It just took so long to get going. Finally it got going at the end. but it was a bit of a trudge to go through. So even if you enjoy that sort of slow-moving world-building fantasy, then absolutely go for it. It just didn't quite work for me. So I gave this one 3 stars, but it was a really great introduction to sort of wider Norse mythology, beyond the MCU and Wagner, which is where all of my Norse mythology knowledge prior to reading this book had come from. The next book I read for both Magical Readathon and Fall into Reading-a-thon, and that is Perfect on Paper by Sophie Gonzalez. This book was so good, it was so much fun. So this is a high school contemporary story about a teenage girl called Darcy. And Darcy runs a secret love advice service at school, so people can anonymously send her letters or messages about their love life, and she anonymously replies with advice. One day, one of the sort of jock guys at school finds out that she is the one behind the letters and pays her to help him get back together with his ex-girlfriend. She goes along with it because she doesn't want anyone to find out that she is behind these letters. She's done some things she's not so proud of, and she does not want it to come out. This was a really fun YA contemporary story, and also was really great by representation, I thought, in the main character. So yes, really enjoyed this one again, and 4 stars from me. Another contemporary book next, and that is Fresh by Margot Wood. And I listened to the audiobook for this one, and again, really enjoyed it. This is a modern, inspired by / reinterpretation of Jane Austen's Emma. I think I said this the right way around. Last time I talked about this book, I called it Emma's Jane Austen. No, Jane Austen's Emma. And it follows the main character, Elliot. She's a freshman at college, and her sort of adventures when she gets to college, finding friendship and romance, and the annoying RA, Rose Knightley. Things happen there. So yes, really enjoyed this one. Again, really good bi-rep in the main character, and just a really fun read, and a good audiobook as well. I think it worked really well in that format. There were a couple of things that, again, didn't quite work for me, so I gave it 4 stars, so would very much recommend that one as well. Then, it was going so well. The next book I read was another arc, and that is The Symmetry of Stars by Alex Myers. This is my first 1-star rating of the year. It just didn't work for me. It just didn't. So this book follows 2 gods, nature and nurture, who decide to have a competition to see who is the best, who is the most important, who is the most influential. And they each pick a set of twins that they are going to raise, or not raise in the case of nature, and then they're going to have a competition. There was like no exposition. I still don't understand the whole twins thing, and why were they going to have a competition? Why did they pick twins? I don't get it. And then it felt like it was trying to make a big statement about opposites and dichotomies and how we don't need them. But in doing that, it just doubled down on every single one of those, especially gender roles. So nurture was, of course, a woman who started off as a wet nurse to the twins, and then was like a mentor governess kind of figure, while nature was a man who neglected the children and taught them about the violence of the real world. I was like, no. And then, of course, at the end, the 2 sets of twins meet, and they're like, hey, was your childhood really weird? Yeah, mine too. And they were like, hey, we're not doing your stupid competition. We're just going to talk about stuff. And don't forget that we're #not like other girls. 1 star. I wonder if my tea is cool enough to actually hold. Yes, it's now of holding temperature. I don't think it's quite drinking temperature yet. Just. The final book I read for the Fall into Reading-a-thon is Carmilla by J. Sheridan Le Fanu, and this is a reread for me. It's a classic vampire novella, and so Carmilla is a mysterious young woman who is found in the woods in Austria. The main character is Laura, who lives in a castle, and they take in Carmilla, and things are going bump in the night, and all sorts of vampiric things happening, plus sparks are beginning to fly between Laura and Carmilla. Even more exciting because this was written in the 1870s. So yes, we love some Victorian lesbian vampires. Really enjoyed the rereading of this. It was so atmospheric. I'd forgotten quite how atmospheric it was. You just got absorbed straight into that story. And I think now I'm just a bit older reading it again, I was able to appreciate more of the ways in which this was just so groundbreaking, not only in having a sapphic relationship at its core, but in the way it presented men and women in Gothic fiction, and how influential it was as a vampire story. It's definitely one you read, you're like, oh, so that's where that trope comes from. So yes, really enjoyed this. It was such a good one to revisit. And yeah, 5 stars. The last book that I read in September was another arc, and that is Electric Love by Shannon O'Connor. This is a contemporary second chance romance. This follows our main character, Ali, who she's in her mid-20s, she's a single mother, and she quite literally bumps into her ex-girlfriend, and they start to reconnect, and who knows what will happen next? Who knows what will happen? This was a really fun story. I really enjoyed sort of getting to know the characters and the romance. It was told in lots of different timelines, so it did jump about, I think perhaps a little too much between different timelines, but otherwise really enjoyed this one. So I gave this one 3 stars. If you're looking for a fun contemporary read, again with a great bi protagonist, then would recommend checking this one out as well. So altogether, a pretty good reading month, lots of pretty good books, some not so good, but overall a really good month of reading. Let me know what you've been reading in September, if there are any books that you would recommend. If you'd like to follow me on any other social medias, all the links are in the description, as are all of the books that I've talked about today and any written reviews that I've done for any of them. I hope you all have a lovely day, and I will see you next time. Bye!